Hey guys, Butts here, and today I want to discuss what I consider kind of just like damage scaling problems in PoE 2, especially like flat damage and regarding like unique weapons and spell gems, etc. So I'm just gonna get right into it. I know this is gonna be like a little complainy, and I apologize about that. This has been kind of weighing on me since the start of the beta, and just kind of feels like it's getting exacerbated the more I play. So I just want to discuss it. Now, I know you guys are going to say a lot of these are just supposed to be leveling uniques. And while that is true, you got to keep in mind if the unique effect is powerful enough, it can be worth throwing away your entire weapon away for. Like a good example of that is Pillar of the Cage God, uh, Death's Harp, Quill Rain, Rampart Raptor, etc. So, and I know a lot of these suck, but if they were good enough, like if the effect was good enough to build around, the damage wouldn't be an issue if there were ways to get flat. But the problem is, currently in PvE2, there are very few ways to actually get flat damage, so most things just turn into Howa. And I've replaced all the uniques that I consider pretty much unusable outside of using Howa with Howa. Trench Timber is a weird corner case because it's a good minion stat stick, but assuming you're using it for attacking, actually, you would need Howa because it has terrible damage. But so you can see, like, this item is just terrible, so it doesn't really count. This item's terrible. And then Death's Harp and Quill Rain are kind of corner cases because Death's Harp can be used to spawn a bunch of like things like Vine Arrow, and then Quill Rain, if Cast on Crit was still in the game, you could use it to like maybe enable a Cast on Crit build. But if you want to actually use these for damage, you would probably need a ton of flat, which means you probably need Howa. So this is Howa, this is Howa. And this is kind of exacerbated by the fact like if we look at like the values of flat LE damage on two-handers, these are really low. Like just I mean, I know the values in PoE 2 are a lot less than PoE 1, but like PoE 1 this goes up to 630. This is literally literally less than a third. And I know that again the damage values are less, so it's like that's not really a fair one-to-one comparison. But like if I go look to try to buy a bow, like this is a 250 elemental DPS bow, super expensive. That's and 250. And by the way, this is split across 3 damage types. Like if to get this amount of LE, so what that means is you would need to either pen or lower resistances of all 3 types. And the only ways that I know of to do that currently are Invoker. He has his ignore elemental resistance on crit, and then an amulet that actually does the same thing where it says ignore elemental resistances on crit. Now, if I want to use like a Fizzbow, let's do a 350. Oh, 350. 10 exalts. The software trade, by the way. So, pretty reasonable, but this has a lot less downsides, right? Because it's Fizz conversion, which means you can use Fizz to conversion scaling things. And it means that you could potentially only deal 1 element. And then Howa is the same because it's just like lightning, right? But this is significantly stronger with a significantly smaller downside. So the problem here is there are like other sources of flat, like you can use, if it's a projectile, you can use Flame Wall, Bone Storm. This is only going to be really realistic or single target. You're not going to clear by bone storming an enemy and then attacking. You can get flat in other sources, right? Like you can get it on rings, like up to 70 here, and then it's the same on quivers and it's the same on gloves. But these are all kind of peanuts, and you're going to need a lot of flat if you want to actually use a unique weapon. So it kind of all comes back to you kind of need to use Howa eventually. Like early, like obviously in the campaign you don't need to, and then like before like late red maps with breach, you don't really need it. But like if you're going to use a weapon that essentially has no damage, you're going to essentially need Howa because you need to get enough flat, and the sources of flat in the game as it stands are just not enough. Outside of you could do some really weird flame wall scaling stuff, like scale this to like level 40 and then always shoot through that for projectiles. But outside of that, you're going to essentially need to have to use Howa. And this flat damage problem is definitely not limited to attacks, and actually I would argue it is worse for spells. Like, for example, if you want to look at the spells that like come from weapons, the damage on these is like pretty terrible. And then if you want to look at the spells that are just used to enable stuff, like Ice Nova, Frostbolt, and then Eye Winter. Eye Winter can technically be okay because you can hit with everything, but Ball Lightning's like this too, where it's just an enabler. It's not supposed to be a main damage skill, so the damage on it's not allowed to be very high. And it's funny enough, a lot of these are projectiles, so you could technically fix them with Flame Wall, but point is, for spells, there is no flat outside of Flame Wall. If they're not projectile, like you're fucked. Like you want to play Ice Nova as your main skill, you can't. It's just not going to deal enough damage. But now you go to like look at the mods on wands. They've clearly intentionally removed flat damage to spells in them. There's damage as extra, which has the same thing as Archmage, right? Where it's like damage as extra lightning based on your mana. The problem is this does not give you flat. This scales off the base. So if the base of the skill is bad, the skill is not usable now. And again, I think that's intentional, but the only way you can technically fix it to get base damage for spells outside of Flame Wall for projectiles is to scale gem levels. If you look at pretty much every spell, they all scale the same way. They all have, sorry, it's taking forever to scroll. They all scale exponentially well. Why is this one so weird? What did I click? I think I clicked on like the weapon spark. Yeah, they all scale exponentially like this. This is going to be literally every spell scales this way. At least one that scales like a spell. Now, so what that really means is that, well, obviously Archmage is a little overtuned right now. The only way to get damage on spells is scaling damage as extra and then scaling gem levels. So every spell, for the most part, is going to stack gem levels or Archmage, which means stacking mana, or both, right? So they're all going to kind of look the same. And that can't really be different because there is no source of flat in the game to like modify that kind of thing. Like if I want to use Elemental Expression on a monk, this skill deals abysmal damage. How would you fix that? Well, there's currently a bug, I guess, where I assume this is a bug, where like +4 on this is +12 to it because it's technically all three elements. I assume that is a bug, but maybe it's intentional because this is energy spent on it, and it's like this is supposed to be like the structure deck for like monk. Maybe you're supposed to use this. But long story short, all the skills or all the spells like have to scale off of gem levels, and then if you're allowed to use it as a main damage skill, you can also scale it with Archmage. So I think it's kind of the problem is even worse. Like if you want to use unique weapons for spells, you can technically get flat like from getting gem levels on like your amulet and like elsewhere, like the unique jewel that gives you plus to gem levels or whatever. But the thing is, they aren't really going to deal enough damage without a ton of gem levels or Archmage. And Archmage isn't going to fix it if they don't have good base damage to begin with. And this is kind of forced, unlike other skills that like don't scale off gem levels. Like for example, like say I look at like Sport Gem, like Mana Flare. If I want to use this has to scale off your mana, and since you can't add flat, you literally can't scale the skill another way. This skill says you will stack mana or you won't deal damage with it. Or you use it to like enable something weird like an ignite or something, which is maybe how it's supposed to be used. But Impending Doom is the same way. It just you have to scale mana for this. There's no other way to do it. You can do Archmage on top of this, which makes sense because again, you're forced to stack mana. Archmage is good, so therefore you will scale this with Archmage. And I think there is one that scales off intelligence. Oh, maybe not. I thought there was a spell that scaled off intelligence. Maybe it was a support or something. But long story short, scale spells, stack levels, that's it. And again, I think it's intentional. Now, other weird ways that kind of have been nixed in PoE 2 for scaling is like this is a chase item in PoE 1. It doesn't have to be a chase item here because it's a chase item in PoE 1. But because of the way damage conversion works in PoE 2, this item, you can only scale the damage with chaos damage. In PoE 1, if let's say you're playing Poison Spark, you could scale it with lightning damage or you could scale it with chaos damage because it's converting it. In PoE 1, you're allowed to scale the thing that gets scaled prior to conversion, and you could also scale it as lightning as extra chaos or, et cetera, et cetera. Or lightning as extra cold would then get converted to chaos and you could scale cold. Or you could somehow convert your damage to a different type and then convert to this, and you could scale those elements. PoE 2, you can only scale the final product. So what that means is you can only scale this with, if you want to use this, you can only scale increased chaos damage to scale your damage. Or poison magnitude, right? There are not a lot of sources of increased chaos damage. And by changing it in this way, this means that there are very limited ways to actually build a character using this. You'll pretty much all be using really similar stuff because you can only scale chaos damage, not the thing that it came from, which is a giant nerf to the way it works, but it's also a giant constraint on the way it actually works, which makes this item like significantly less interesting. Actually, to the point of, I don't think it ever makes sense to use Original Sin right now, and you probably just use Plague Finger. You just go poison, because this is like if I was like doing Firestorm poison or whatever, I wouldn't use like I wouldn't use the ring. I would just use these, because then I could actually scale increase fire damage, which is probably going to be like, there's fire damage in AoE nodes. Like it's just going to give me way more ways to actually scale my damage. And this is actually like, I guess this one is not even like a, this is not even a damage problem exactly. Conversion in this game kind of removes scaling in a lot of ways. Like for example, if we look at, was it Iron Reflexes? Now, I mean, our armor in PoE 2 currently is terrible, and it sounds like it's not going to get better after the patch that they just talked about with like Jonathan, Mark, Darth Microtransaction, and Gazi or whatever. But you can't scale increased evasion rating with Iron Reflexes like in PoE 1, you can scale increases to armor or increased evasion, and it will scale both because it converts. PoE 2, you actually can only scale this with increases to armor. So it means this is extremely restricted on how you scale it. Like you can't be a ranger that's like taking a bunch of evasion and then coming down here to convert it to armor. No, you will be a warrior that, well, I guess just wants to wear hybrid evasion armor gear for some reason, and then you'd use this, which means this is significantly less powerful over here in PoE 2, but it's also extremely restrictive in how you build it. You will build it by stacking armor. You will not build it by stacking evasion. It like literally halves the options again. So I don't want this to be like all negative. It's just, this is kind of a recurring problem I keep running into in, I guess, this game in general, and that a lot of the ways to scale damage have been, I don't even want to say simplified, because I don't think it's exactly more simple. It's just, well, no, I guess it is. There is a way you will do something, and there is no other way you will do said thing. Like the spell problem I was talking about of like, you will stack gem levels, you will scale Archmage, that won't change. It's just because of the way the damage is designed. And then if you're using a unique weapon, you will use Howa, because there is not a lot of sources of flat. That might change over time. We might get more flat. Spells, until we get spell Howa or whatever, there's just, or some way to get flat. This problem will continue to persist, where certain spells that just don't deal enough base damage just will not be usable in any meaningful way. And then if Archmage gets completely gutted, most spells just will stop dealing damage entirely because spells in this game just kind of have shit damage and shit scaling. So it's that in combination with the way conversions changed work, like even like things like Call of the Brotherhood, or pretty much all of these conversion ones. It used to be like in PoE 1, you could scale the cold, you could scale the lightning, you could scale both sides of the like conversion. But since it's over here, if you want to use these, you can only scale the final byproduct. Like if you want to be on the cold part of the tree to take increased cold damage, well, you can't do that. Sorry, that just doesn't work with Whispers of the Brotherhood, because your damage is converted to lightning. You have to be on the lightning part of the tree or take increases the lightning damage. So it is what it is. I hope that they consider addressing something like this, but I haven't really seen much mention of it. It just kind of feels like this is a fundamental problem with the way PoE 2 damage is set up, where maybe it's fine and it's just like the building is just not for me, I guess, with the way that the damage works, but it just feels really, really suffocating to build characters in this, because it just feels like it just takes a lot of the creativity out of it, or a lot of the interesting ways to build characters. You just kind of all get railroaded into the same road. But yeah, I am still having a ton of fun with PoE 2. I just I'm kind of down on this aspect of it, and I hope it's something that gets addressed eventually. And you guys probably already know all this stuff. I just kind of wanted to rant because it's kind of bumming me out when I'm building characters. So yeah, sorry this one's kind of a bummer, but yeah, I just wanted to chat about it. All right, Poops and Bus out.